Good morning, good morning. Sruli, can you hear me? Baruch Hashem. What do we have today? Whew.
Good morning, Rabbi. Good morning, Chevra.
Good morning.
Okay.
Zeli, can you do me a favor? Zeli?
Yes.
Can you put on the Rambam chat that who to Daniel Hassan or to Mendel, if they have access to if they're awake, if they can press number 19 on their phone, I'll be able to go live on YouTube. If not, is not.
Press what number?
19. In other words, I'm getting someone who's getting a verify that it's you is going to get number 19.
Can you please press number 19?
Yes, on the Google verify.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Yes.
Wait another second. If they're up, they got it, and if not, there's nisht. Okay, I'm just going to leave it like that and let us go. With the help of Hashem, we are learning today's 3 Prakim Rambam, Hilchos, Maaseh, Hakorbanos, Prakim Zayin, Ches, and Tes. We're beginning with Perek Zayin. We're going to learn about, I take that back one more time, take 2. Nachamo. With the help of Hashem, we are learning today's 3 Prakim Rambam, Hilchos, Maaseh, Hakorbanos, Prakim Yud Aleph, and Yud Beis. We are beginning with Perek Yud. Perek Yud speaks about the mitzvahs of eating the kachim. And we're going to have who gets to eat it, when do they get to eat it, where do they get to eat it, the karbanos that may or may not be cooked together, as we'll understand why sometimes that will be something that's prohibited. We're going to have scenarios where there's going to be a mixture of people cooking kachim food with chulin food. What are the dinim of bittul, right? So midoraisa, normally bittul is only a majority. Then we have the concept that we learned about the ratio of 60-1. We learned that by Truma, you have to have a ratio of 100-1, and that is the ratio that's needed when it comes to kachim. And we're going to learn in this chapter about the division of the karbanos and the hides amongst the kohanim of that mishmar, of that Beis Av. Perek Yud has 23 halachas, beginning with halacha Aleph, says the Rambam. Achilas hachatos v'ha'asham is a mitzvah saseh, shenemar, Pasik in Parshas Tetzaveh, va'achlu oisam asher kupar bohem. This is in reference to the kohanim. I mean, the psukim in Tetzaveh speaking about the miluyim, the initial inauguration of the kohanim. In other words, say Chazal that hakohanim oichlem uba'alim eschaprim. And we mentioned yesterday already that al pi Chasidus, achilas kohanim that can only begin after achilas mizbeach is really something. The ruchni is higher. It accomplishes even more than that the mizbeach. Then the Achilas Mizbeach. Achilas Mizbeach is the end of the Avodah of Birurim, and the eating of the Kohanim begins in that which comes after the Avodah of Birurim, which is the Avodah of Yechudim, etc. Now, who adin l'shar kachim that she'oichlem hakoyanim. Shar kachim is, for example, the basar of the Shalmei Tzibur, the chazay and the shoik of the Shalmei Yachid. In other words, even when their achila does not bring about any kapara, even there, nevertheless, the eating of kachim is a mitzvah. Whenever you have the remaining portions, the shiraim of the menachos, and by the way, today in Perek Yud Beis we're going to begin to learn about the menachos. If it's a non-kohen bringing it, only a kmitza of the flour offering is offered on the mizbeach. The rest of it is going to be divided amongst the kohanim. The rest is called shirayim. That is also a mitzvah saseh. Shneimar, as it says, a pasuk in Parshas Tzav, v'hanei sedes mimeno, in reference to the mincha, to the flour offering, yoichlu aron abon. Halacha gimel. Now, when we're speaking about korbanos that are in the category of kachim, which is chatos, which is asham, or all menachos are kachim, they may only be eaten to male kohanim and only in the azar. Now, if they ate it in the hechal, then good, nechlu. Shneimar, as it says, a pasuk in Koydach, l'chol menchasam, l'chol chatasam, l'chol hashamam, bekoidish hakachim toichlu. And that is where Chazal learn, now guys, the hechel is koidish kachim. We're not speaking about, the koidish kachim versus the koidish. It means in the area that's most sacred. Kol zachar yoichel oisai. The hechel is a koidish kachim. The hechel, you can argue, has even more kedusha to a certain degree than the azara. So that's why post facto it's okay. It's not nice that you ate there, but you fulfilled your obligation. B'chein shalmei tzibur. As we mentioned, even though normally shlamim are in the category of kachei kalim, shalmei tzibur, we learned yesterday, is in the category of kodesh kachim. I mean, the two lambs may only be eaten by male kohanim, and in the azara, hareim kachatas ka'ashim kamoi shebi arna. Halacha dal. Chazav v'shoik shal shlamim, right? The gift that's given from a shlamim. Now we're speaking about kachei kalim. And the basar are eaten by the owners, but that is given to the kohanim. Here, since it's not from an animal that's in the category of kodesh kachim, they can be eaten by kohanim. It doesn't have to be only the gender male. Zecharim unekeves. Shneimar, as it says, l'chon nesatim uliv onecha befeidish koydach uliv noisech. The 4 breads that are taken from the 40 breads of the Torah, the 2 breads that are taken from the 20 breads of the Nazir, that also and what's also not only to males but also to the females, to nekevas. We're speaking about the b'chor that's given to the kohen, and it was offered on the mizbeach. But that which remains is to be eaten by all kohanim, male or female. And therefore, and another one, anything that can be eaten not only by the male kohanim but also by the nekevos, just like truma. However, it's not like truma because truma can be eaten anywhere. This is kodesh; it can only be eaten in Yerushalayim. But we're speaking about who, not where. Anything that's part of the kohen's family or possessions. For chulam nechalim b'chol chulam meaning all kach. They can be eaten anywhere in the city. And b'cholam also refers to the to the shlamim. We're speaking about shlamim that can be eaten to the owners. If it's kachei kalim, it has to be eaten in Yerushalayim. Shneimar, as it says, eis chazei atrufa, ve'eis shoik hatruma toichlu b'makim tohar. Now, loy nember behem b'makim kadosh. Dafke kodesh means the azara. Tor means machne Yisrael. Shekin negdoi l'doiros Yerushalayim. And who adin la'maiser or Pesach, which are also in the category of kachei kalim, like shlamim, they could be eaten anywhere in Yerushalayim. And now, the inner part of the windows and the thick walls of Yerushalayim, or the inside of the doorways, are like inside. And there also one may eat a kachei kalim. Halacha vav shlamim nechalim b'yoyim hazvicha. Oh, now let's speak about how much time do you have to eat a korbanos. So shlomim can be eaten on the day that they were slaughtered, and the following night, and the next day, until sunset. Shenemar, as it says, on the day that it was sacrificed, and tomorrow. And then it says, that's when it's already noisa. That's when you chayiv kodesh. So nimtzei slame shehem necholom l'shnei yamim v'layla echad. Bein chelek hakoyhanim of shlamim the chazei and the shoik. Bein chelek haba'olim and who adin lebechoyru meiser that are like kachim kalim like shlamim that they have the longest amount of time that one may eat these karbanis. Halacha zayin. Avol, there's an exception. Toido, which is one of the categories of shlamim. Afapi she kachim kalim, and normally kachim kalim you're saying you can be eaten for 2 days and 1 night. Einon necheles ela b'yom hazvicha im halayla. It may only be eaten on the day it was slaughtered and the night afterwards. Shenamar, as it says, and now we're going to a pasuk in Parsha Sav, which is the parsha where the Torah tells us about the Maaseh HaToida, that the Yom Korbana Yei Ochel Lo Yimniach Mimenu Ad Boker. So that's an exception. Like we mentioned, the whole source of a Sudas Hoida comes from the Lachmei Toida. In other words, you have 36 loaves of bread, and they have to be eaten only on 1 day and 1 night. There's no way that the one who brought it will be able to eat that much. He's obligated to invite other people to eat with him. A korban toida is a Thanksgiving korban. That's the source that when people make today, they want to express they got a Thanksgiving, they make a meal and they invite. And since from a shlamim you always give something to the kohen, that's why during that seudah you're supposed to invite chachamim. Also, again, that was the third type of shalmei yachid, only 1 day and 1 night. Ben chelek hakihanim, ben chelek ha-ba'olim. All right. And the Torah actually, the parsha of Shlamim, the Torah writes, there's an extra Shlamav. Chazal learned that comes to include Shalmei Nazir, like Shalmei Toida. Now, who adin lachatos ula ashan, ula Shalmei tzibur, ula shiyarei menachis. In other words, everything that's in the category of kachem, shahakoil nechol, only liyoyim. Now, guys, liyoyim, if you shechted it early in the morning, there's going to be more time to eat it. If someone did the shechita, right before the Talmud Shalbeinu Arbayim, so then you'll have less time. From whenever the dam was sprinkled, from when after the emurim were offered, from then till the end of the day and the following night. In other words, really the big exception is shlamim sheperish behem hakosav, and then ubechoyer umaiser hadoimim lahem. What you don't find here is the Pesach, even though the Pesach and bechoyer and maiser had many similarities, but not the time of eating it, as we know that the Korban Pesach has the most limited time to finish consuming it. Halacha ches kol elo hanacholim liyim elaylo. Din Torah sheheim necholim achi alamud hashachar. You can really eat it until the amud hashachar. However, chdei laharchik minho aveiro amru chachamim she'ein necholim ela ad chatzois halaylo. Halacha tes kol hakorbanos ben kotche kotche ben kotchem kalim ein oichlum oisam ela hatohoidim and hamulim. Furthermore, even if someone who went to the mikveh and they waited until the night, if they are from those who also have to bring a kapara on the 8th day, the mechusrei kipurim, im loy hevi if loy kapara asay eno echel bakachim. Now, what about a tumtum? A tumtum also lechel bakachim lefishu safik orel. Now, you understand? No, it's even that which can be eaten by Zcharim and the Kevais, a tumtum is safik orel if he is a male. Aval ho androgenes says that Rambam Yeroyali that he can eat kachik kalim, which could be eaten lezacher v'lana keva. So mimanav shach. Now on that, many say that the chelik, the Kesavishna says that if and only when his male organ was circumcised. So like this, the zacher he's a zacher and it's circumcised, and then the keva is on a keva. So whichever way the androgenous gets to eat kachik kalim. Halachayut umuta lechel asakachim b'chol meichel. Now, b'chol meichel, I want you to know here, I know it sounds like you can add foods to it. We're going to get to that in a moment. B'chol meichel, the way many understand that Rambam, means you can prepare it any way you want, unlike the Korban Pesach, You can roast it, and you can partially cook it, and you can really cook it. Afilo hakoyahanim mutarim lechol chalkom. Now, here will mean that they can add spices to change its taste, to upgrade its taste. Now, the Rambam says, now this is the way we're learning, now the Rambam will clarify that you can eat it b'chol meichel, meaning ula'achlam tsuluyim, or shalukim, or mevushalim. And the other thing that he said, ulashanais ba'achilasan, is being explained. The law says, l'toichem tavalim shel chulin. You can even add tavalim of chulin, but not spices that are truma, because we have this rule, shelo yaviu es truma l'dei pisol. Truma can be eaten anywhere. If you're going to add the truma spices in the kachim kalim, then you can only eat it in Yerushalayim. Correct? Truma doesn't have an expiration date. Kachim kalim, even the shlamim, only shnei yamim v'layla echad. So you don't want to diminish the time and the area in which you can have truma, so you cannot add truma spices. Now, just to bring out, there's a topic here. We're going to have this also later in this chapter. If chulin was mixed together with kachim, how do you get chulin in there? Or how do you get the tvalim of chulin? There's a rule that you cannot bring chulin la'azara. This is a big topic. Let's go right now. The bones that we're speaking about are bones that has no edible meat in it. No edible meat on it. Hanisharais, if there's just bone, even though it comes from kachim, mutarais, mamish, they were never consecrated. And the oisa odamahem kol kelim sheyirtzem halacha yudal hoisa lam achilas mu'etes. If there's even only a small amount of meat on it, but you have some meat, oichlem ima chulin utruma, you can eat with it. You don't put the chulin in it, but you can eat also chulin food. You can also eat truma food. What we would like is then when you eat the kachim, you eat it im hasava. Gavaldik. In other words, you're not going to eat kachim and leave the table hungry. So we want for one. Whenever you eat kachim, even if you only have a little bit of meat, you can eat something else. You're not cooking it together, but you can eat something else. Again, that's the question. Where would they eat the chulin? Some opine that they were allowed to eat the chulin in the azara. And that's a problem. You're not allowed to bring chulin in the azara. This might be an exception. You're bringing meat to be able to eat a little bit of kachim im hasava. Now, the opposite, but if there's a lot of kachim meat, you don't want to eat anything else. If you remember, we learned this in the Gemara, achila gasa is not called achila. In other words, you have to know, if you're going to, the point is, when you finish the meal of kachim, you should be satisfied. If you need to eat something else to get to the point where eating the little bit that you got, you'll be satisfied, add. But if there's a lot of kachim meat, adarabah, adding something else will make you eat beyond what you need. That's not even called eating. And the same is with shiyarim and nachas. If what you're getting is only a little bit, we don't want for a kohen to eat kachim and to walk away hungry. And if there isn't enough kachim, so eat something prior to eating the kachim, or eat it with the kachim. Halacha yudbeis. Ein mevashlen chatos ashlam im mura mitoida. You cannot cook whether the chatos meat or the asher meat. In muram mitoida is kachim kalam, because you don't mix kachim and kachim kalam. El nazir. Why is that? Now, interestingly, just to know that even though the toida is also only one day and one night, the muram, the bread, right, from the el nazir is also only one day and one night. But kachim kalam can be given to zacharim and nekevus. Kachim can only be eaten by zacharim. The same likud, if you mix two types of consecrated foods together, then you're going to have to deal with whatever you have. So you're going to be limiting the other one. Right? There's no zman difference. But who can eat it? Kachim, only zachar. The kachim kalim, if you wouldn't have mixed it with, even in the kavas. And the same thing is kachim can only be eaten in the azara. Kachim kalim can be eaten anywhere. So you're limiting the makem achilas. Similarly, why is that? Because here, even though they both can be eaten in Yerushalayim, but shlamim can be eaten for longer. Another case, Now think about this. Now my mom is flipping it. You had a shlamim that was brought yesterday. So how much longer are you allowed to eat it? Only until the end of today. Shlamim can be eaten for 2 days and 1 night, but if it began yesterday, then the expiration date of the shlamim is now shkia. If you're going to mix it with, let's say, the basar chatas, the basar asham that was slaughtered today, ironically, this kachim can be eaten for longer because you only began counting today. So if you're going to mix them together, you're going to be limiting the asham and the chatas, the pneishim and also the oichleim. The kachim, each one limits the other. The asham is going to limit that only males can eat it. The asham or the chatas is going to limit the place of the eating. And the shlamim that's already in its final day is going to limit the asham and the chatas. However, chatas and asham together, that were both slaughtered on the same day, then they can be cooked together. Toidel ve'el nazir can be cooked together. Habachoyd v'chazir v'shoy can be cooked together. Because as long as you're not limiting these 3 things that we're learning about in this chapter, who can eat it, when you can eat it, and where you can eat it, then you can mix different kachim together. Now, haticha shel kachim. Oi. Now, oi is even though the Rambam writes oi, but haticha shel kachim, which is pigul. So this is the first time we're learning the word pigul. Pigul means that when any one of the 4 avodas of dam is being done, shchita, kabbalah, hilach, and zedika, the kohen had in mind that he's going to do another part of this korban beyond the prescribed time. It's a machsheves chutz lizman, which invalidates the korban to the level that if you eat it, you're chayiv, God forbid, kares. Or if you have meat from any of the kachim korbanos that was not eaten in its prescribed time, that which is remaining is called moisar, has to be destroyed. If someone eats it, the chayiv, kares. In other words, you have a piece of kachim that is asur on the highest level of isur. If it got cooked im chatichos acheros, both with kachikalim, or chatichos acheros can also include chulin. And now to make sense, to understand this, the ending of the Yud Beis and Yud Gimel, let's add a couple of steps. And those are, number 1, we mentioned this in the introduction. When it comes to mixtures, kachim is like truma, which means that when you have a ratio of 100 to 1, you have the concept of bittul. Number 2, when it comes to the dinim of bittul, a chaticha that's haru'uya li'schabed is never batel. So let me explain the case over here. The meat of noisa, the meat of pigul, was something that was cooked together with other meats. Aleph, you have the ratio against it. Beis, you recognize the original pigul or noisa and you removed it. So now there's no chaticha haru'uya li'schabed. But since you cooked it together, the tam of the pigul or of the noisa went into everything else. You have the ratio. You have the 100 to 1. So there's a big chumrah that we find by kachim. And what's the chumrah? That even when you have the ratio, it's not always going to be batel. And therefore, oisa machatichos are going to remain asurais lizarim. Even though, again, we're speaking also about a mixture in chulin. Elama, they will be allowed to be eaten by kohanim. Why can they be eaten by kohanim, chevra? Because there was the bittul. Again, there was 100 of that which is mutter to kohanim against the pigul or noisa. The pigul or noisa itself, which is not batul, was removed. Nevertheless, there's a chumrah when it comes to kachim that it's not completely batul. There's a lot of lumdis in this halacha. Because like Mimanavshach, if it's mutaris like Hananis, it was batul. If it was batul, if it's chulin, why can't Zorim eat it? But that's the rule. Now, halacha yud gimel, b'sar kachim and b'sar kalim that got cooked with basar taiva, which means with chulin meat, and we're going to go through the same ratio that you had basar taiva 100 or more times against the kachim meat. And if there's an issue of chaticha haru'ya li'schabed, it was removed. So you have theoretically the bittul. Nevertheless, you don't have concerning every din, the din of bittul. The basar taiva is asur latameim. However, it's muter latahoidim. Wow. Tahoidim, even if they are zarim. This is an amazing dinim. Again, there's a lot of lumdus of them, like Biman of Shach, but for some aspects, we don't need to use bittul, and whenever you don't need to use bittul, there is no bittul. For that which you need to employ the ratio of 100 to 1. In other words, if it's tohidim, even though a zod cannot eat a kache. Nevertheless, the zod will be allowed to eat it. Eat the chulin. Again, the case again is that you have the 100 against the meat of kachim that fell into it. Let's move on. Halacha Yud Dalid. Nemar ba'oila says that Rambam oila asher hikriv la'koyin lo yeh. The hide goes to the coin. Its mashman goes to that coin. We'll see it's not so. It goes to all of the kohen. It says by the chatos hakoyin amachate oisa, he should be the one eating it. It says by the asham la'koyin asher yechaper by lo yeh. It says by the shlamim la'koyin azorik as nama shlamim lo yeh. It says by the mincha amakir oisa yechlenu. It sounds like the one who brings the carbon is the one that eats it. Nish, not, that's not the way it works. It's eaten by all of the kohanim. We'll see in that day saf. Why does the trader write only the kohen who did it can get a part of it? It means the kohanim of that day saf have to be ones that are ra'ui. They have to be fit to have brought the carbon. And we'll see an exception. We'll see the exception that a Balmum is not the role to do the avodah. He also takes part of it. However, for example, a tamei, even if his problem is only today, at night, right? Let's say he's dealing with Tumas Meis. Today is the 7th day. There's no Mechusar Kippurim. At night, and you can eat kachim day and night. If during the time that they brought it, he was not allowed to bring it, even though he's part of that Beisav, he's not allowed to partake. Gavaldik. Avol Igan Chaluka, going back, in other words, that it's not to the coin that brought it. It's being divided. Who Hakor la'anshe Beisav? And what the Rambam already explained, that in the times of Shmuel Haroya, right, or Shmuel Hanavi and David HaMelech, they divided the Kohanim into 24 Mishmaros. Every mishmar later was divided into 6 batei av, and that was their agreement. Chelik, your chelu, I'll take on my day, you'll take on your day. All of the kahanim of that beisaf take part. Shemakrivim ba'isayim, and v'kulam chalke v'chol kachi hamikdash ish ka'achiv. And by the way, they made a pious. That means not everyone actually did it, but all of them got a part of the kachim. Bein zeh shehikriv, bein achiv she'imer b'hamikdash lo hikriv. But again, he has to be ro'u lahakriv. Allah chetazva. Now, what does the Rambam talking about? What distinction are we referring to? So the Rambam explains his question. Shaharei, by the mincha that's called ma'afei tanur, and we're going to learn about this today in the 3rd chapter. The Torah writes the words lakoyin hamakiv oisoi loy. See again, mashma, that only the one that did it. By minchas hasoilis, it says v'chol mincha b'lulav Hashem v'charei v'lochol b'nei aharon tiyah ish ka'achiv. Now, the Rambam is really saying that it's always l'chol b'nei aharon, but by a mincha you have that contrast that you don't have in any other place. In all the psukim that Rambam quoted in Halacha Yudala, that always says only to the kohen. So we already touched. That means to the kohen that's a ra'ui. By a mincha, the Torah differentiates. Why does the Torah use different words if we're saying it's always the same? It's divided by all of the kahanim of the Beis Av. Answers the Rambam. Sha'afuya, when you have flour offerings that were baked, everyone understands that when you get a part, what you're getting is something of substance. You know, when you get a piece of bread, as long as it's a baked bread, that means it's a finished product. Even if you only get a kazayas, well, you got something. You got a shtikul sharayim. Harei royaloi. Royaloi means you can eat it right away. So there, it makes more sense that you don't give it to the one who did it. Every coin of the Beis Av takes a part from every carbon. Aval hasoilos, you might think that if you have a flour offering, so what are you going to divide? You're gonna divide flour or flour mixed with oil. It's not finished yet. It's not a finished product. Im yechalko esav benayim. So what are you going to get? You're going to get maloi kapai. You're going to get up, say, a handful of flour, or even less than a handful of flour. sometimes it's so little flour that you can't even knead it. It's not enough to knead to make bread. So therefore, you would think that when it comes to the korbanos that are soilers, you know what you do? Let's give an example. Let's say you have in a base ab. I'm just got an example. You have 50 kohanim or 100 kohanim. Let's say on an average day there is 100 minchas that are brought. One might have thought, you know what? Anyways, more or less every kohen will get a mincha. Let every kohen get all of the shirayim, all of the remaining of the soilers. Like this, he won't get a little amount of flour. And everyone at the end will anyways get more or less the same amount. Everyone will get an entire shirayim of a mincha soilers. That's why the Torah says no. Like mincha means I'll get from Yeruv and you'll get from Shimon. At least when what I get from one mincha is something substantial enough that I can be able to make it into a finished product. And so that's why when it comes to the soilers, even here you do what you always do, which is every time your korban was brought, all of that which is going to be for the kohanim is given to all of the kohanim. The kanom rachachamim ein cholken mincha keneged mincha. Afilu Maaseh machvas keneged Maaseh machvas. Even if you're going to say no, we're going to mamish make it fair. We're going to learn again in Pedicute base. There's a korban that's prepared in a flat pan. There's another korban that's deep fried. Every kohen is going to get an entire of that type. At the end of the day, every kohen will get exactly what the other kohen got. No one will get more. No one will get less. It doesn't work that way. What do we do? From every mincha itself, we divide all of the shirayim to all of the koyanim that are royu to bring the korban of that beisav on that day. There's very little left by the chatos oif. You don't say or the chazin the shoik keneged the chazin the shoik. But because if we're going to divide every chazin and the shoik, every korban is going to get a little piece of meat. But that's exactly what we do. Another rule. Even though we said that kachim kalim can be eaten by zcharim, by mekevos, by the avodim, doesn't matter. He can eat from what his father got, but he doesn't get his own chelik. Which because he's a zachar, even if he's a katan, but he won't get his own portion. Even when they can eat it, because it says ish ke'achiv. Abel balmum. Here's the big exception. A balmum, whether it's a permanent blemish, whether it's a temporary blemish, whether he was born with his blemish, whether he became blemished later, even though he's not a ra'ui to do the avodah. Choylik v'oichel. Shenemar lechem elikov mikotche hakotchem. That's a pasuk in Emer that's teaching us the dinim of blemish kohanim. And the Torah writes beferish that he gets. Now by the way, he did work, but not avoid the work. We learned, for example, he deworms the eitzim for the maracha. So they gave him supplemental work, secondary work, preparatory work. But he didn't do the avoida, but he gets. But for Hushia Roy Lachila, he cannot be tamei. Even if at night he's going to be tired. Halacha yutches v'chein kohen gadol. Another than the kohen gadol gets to take whatever he wants. Shaloi b'chalukah elanoita kol mashi. It's good to be the kohen gadol. Halacha yutes kol roi lachil sakachim v'shas akarben, like we said before. However, b'chol she'ein roi lachil v'shas avoida afa pishu roi la'avoida. So we're speaking not about the avoida, about eating. Fareo roi lachil erev. What are we adding over here? It's full yoim, or a mechusek kippurim, or an oinen on the day of Kavura. Even a kohen gadol that is allowed to do the avodah while he is an oinen, but the kohen gadol cannot eat. Because while he did the avodah as an oinen, that kohen gadol cannot take a portion. Halacha. Kol she'ein roi le'echol klal. A kohen who's not fit halachically to eat, the rule is ein roy la'avoid, with the only exception of the kohen gadol who's an oinen. He is taken not roy la'echol, and he is roy la'ovid. Shu ovid ve'ein oichel k'mashaviyan. Another klal. V'chol ish ein roy la'avoid, ein roy la'echol. What's the exception? The balmum. And that's explicitly written in the Torah. Halacha chafal, kol she'ein loy chelek ba'basar. If you don't get a part of the chaluk of the basar, you don't get a part of the hides. And afilu tami b'shas rikas adamim. And he's taught during the hekter chalavim. Come on, doesn't matter. Ein chelek ba'basar. Shenemer hamakrev es dam hashlamim es chelu b'nei aron loyti asher kerem leman. You have to have both. You have to be roy le'echol during the makrev, both of the dam and of the chelav. Achiyator v'roy la'avoida mishas rika ad achar hekter chalavim. Halacha chav beis not nitma achar zrika. Look at the scenario. If someone became tamei on a level of tumah that all you need to do is to go to the mikveh. When they threw the dam, he was tar. Then he became tamei. You listen to this. And then he went to the mikveh. And he's already tar when they burnt the chalavim. So he was tar by the dam and by the chelav. But in between, he was tamei. And you should know that Rambam has a big cloud. The Rambam always holds that every time the Gemara says teku, ein moitzin miyodeh. So therefore, we don't know whether he gets a portion. So if he grabs it, ein moitzin oisim miyodeh, because maybe the halacha will be like this sad of the boya that was shaloi nifshuta, that he does get a chelik. At least now we took it, so he keeps it. Halacha chav gimel, the final halacha, korban sibur haba b'tumah. As we mentioned, right in Hilchos Bias HaMikdash, if the majority of the kohanim are tamei, it may be offered by a tamei kohen. Now, even though tameim are allowed to bring it, guys, I want you to know we're speaking about a scenario where since the minority of the kohanim were tohidim, it's ideal to use a kohen that's starved. That's the whole Rambam, that tumah is only the choyev etzibur. And I'll tell you more, if the kohen that's tamei actually brought the carbon, it will become, no one can eat it. No one can eat it. Here we're speaking about a case where it could have been brought b'tumah. That's what the Rambam means. It was actually brought by Tahoinim, which is why it's still halachically edible. In our case, ein cholkim im Tahoinim lechel be'erev, which is quite amazing. In other words, they don't get a chelik. Why don't they get a chelik? They were ro'ui to bring it. They were ro'ui to bring it, but they were not fit to eat it. Like we mentioned, that the tamei brings the carbon, even when it's duchoy of tzibur, it may not be eaten. So that concludes these klalim, that who gets the chalukah, you have to be ro'u lahakrid and ro'u lechol, with a few exceptions that the Rambam gives. Moving
Rabbi,
on. Yes.
I don't think the YouTube is on.
I know it's not on. I'm sorry, because whenever I go out of LA, I need to press a confirmation, and whoever was not awake when that happened. I can try it again. And someone has to press a button. Like the number is 80. Someone is going to press 80, then we're going to go on to YouTube. Chavra Pedek Yud Aleph of Maaseh Hakorbanos is all about different lavim that you're going to be chayv malchus for eating that which should not have been eaten when it comes to kachim. Like, for example, if you eat oila has to be burnt, right? Or if a person ate kachim, but outside the azarim. Or, if the meat was simply taken out of the azarim, or kachim kala meat was taken out of Chomeis Yerushalayim, even if it was brought back in. That's called psul yoitza. And many other lavim. It's all about the different lavim for eating different parts of kachim, those parts which the Torah says may not be eaten. It's a relatively short chapter. Perek Yud Aleph has 9 halachas, beginning with halacha Aleph Zakter Rambam. Kol ha'oichel kezayis mebisar ha'oila. Oil means it has to be fully burnt. If someone ate from it, doesn't make a difference. Bein lifnei zrikas damam, bein la'achas zrikas damam, loikem. Shenemar, as it says in Parshas Re'eh, loisuchal le'achoil b'shorecha, Maaseh digancha. Now there, you can argue. The Torah is speaking about Maaseh. 1 second. The Torah adds the words unidorecha. What are we talking about? So Chazal tell us that this nidorecha in the pasuk in the A is referring to oila, which comes as an adava, or some of them come as an adava. That this is the warning: don't eat it. And again, it's not don't eat it bisha orecha. Don't eat it at all. Now, when it comes to eating, you chayiv malchus when you eat a kazayis. Okay, what part of the oilam is machayiv the kazayis? Any part of the oilam. So therefore, you combine halacha base. So the chelev of the oilam together with the meat of the oilam, together with the nesachim and the minchas nesachim, which will be the salta, the flour, the oil, and the wine of its nesachim. These are 5 different items that all are coming together. Even if you only ate a fifth of a kazayis from each, or in any other ratio, as long as together they are combined to a kazayis, you violated the law for which you'll be chayiv malchus. I'm saying for which you'll be chayiv malchus because we pass them like Rabbi Yechanan that even chatzi shir also. Then I tell you, you chayiv right away, but chayiv punishment only when you eat a kazayis. Halacha given. The chayin, another din, not oila, chatos, ashlamim, but the emurim have to be burnt on the mizbeach. So if someone ate a kazayis, mikol ho'emurim, bein lifnei zrika, bein lachas zrika, bein koyin, bein yisrael, loike. Because ho'emurim, they are to be completely burnt on the mizbeach, like the entire oil. And v'harei nemar, and the Torah writes when it comes to the minchas kohanim, which is again next chapter's topic. We're beginning with menachas today. It's exciting. Minchas kohanim, no kemitza is removed from it. The Torah writes the words kolol tihya loisei achel. So the word kolol means completely burnt. Chazal say kol shu kol hamizbeach. Anything that's designated to be burnt on the altar, achilase v'loisase loisei achel. Not only a mincha, and the loiken olav b'kazayis. Chein hoichol kazayis mabisar chatos hanis rafois. Why? That's the chatos that's burnt. That's the avodah, because its dam was offered lifnim. Loike shenema v'chol chatos ashiyuva midam elol moyed loisei achel. Narvos then be'esh tisari. Loisei achel is allowed. Chayiv malchus if you ate it. Ate a kazayis. Halacha dal. Kol hoichol kazayis mabisar kochim afilu kochim kalim koidem zrikas damam. Parts of the carbon that you are to eat, but only, like we said, only after the zrikas adam and after the emurim. If you ate it before zrikas damim, you're going to be chayiv malchus, as it says in the Eid lesucha lecho b'shorecha meiser digoncha tiroshcha v'yitzerecha v'nidvoisecha. That's another chazal. We already explained what the unidorecha comes to teach. Now comes unidvoisecha. Kolomer lesucha lecho nidvoisecha b'shorecha. Koidim shuzar kendamim b'sharei hamakim. All right, of any kachim, even kachim kal. Pnei lamdu shuzu azar lo echol toida ishlamim koidim zedikas damim. And v'wadin l'shar kachim, whether the kalim or the chamul. Now that we mentioned about the Isur by kachim kalim, so before in halacha beis, when we spoke about the oilo, we were mitzaref the 5 parts of an oilo. Now that we mentioned the shlamim, there's another part which is also going to be used if needed to combine to the kazayis to be machayev amalkis. Ushisha devarim b'toyda shehem. The same seder, the chelev, the basar. Then let's go now to the flour, oil, and wine. And now you also have the 40 loaves or the finished lechem. Kulam it starts from the kazayis, even though you did not eat a kazayis from any one of them, and you will be chayev malkis. Halacha 5. Another din. If you eat it after the zrikas adam and after the imurim are brought, but you ate it outside the correct place, like we learned in Perek Yud, right? There is a makom, like all the same pasuk, and now we're going to focus on these words. These words. So that these words, and really, not only chatos and hasham, not only which is chutz la'azara, also malchus. Shechaymas Yerushalayim lekachei kalim is kachaymas azara lekachei kachim. The echav b'san chatzos v'asham oi sheyarei menacha. He's going back to all kachei kachim. Sheyarei menacha is also kachei kachim. Halacha 6. Psar kachei kachim. It's simple. Now another psul. If meat of kachei kachim were accidentally, God forbid, purposefully taken out of the walls of the azara, or if the meat of kachim kalim, they were taken out. They were not eaten there. They were just taken out from the walls of Yerushalayim, nifsal, they become invalid, and they are always going to remain invalid. Still, asur la'achloim. Now, where do you have a loika? So, Where's the lav? Interestingly, even though we just said so shenemar, no, because that is when it's outside the azar. Here, you need to have a proof, even if it was brought back in. But the pasuk, interestingly, is from ubasar basada treifa lo yisaychelu, from Mishpatim. Now, basar basada treifa. Basada means it's not in its natural place; it's out. Kiven sheyatsa basar chutz lamichitzasa, it becomes like a treifa. K'mo shebiyana melchus machos asuris. Halacha zayin. Nichnas basar kachel kalam lahechol. So everything has to be kept in its place. What happens instead of going out, you went in, then it's kosher. Now the Rambam doesn't have to say this halacha zayin concerning kachi kachim, because we learned today in Perek Yud that even if you ate basar kachi kachim by hechel, then you fulfilled your mitzvah. The chiddush is that even kachim kalim, if it entered, it didn't become invalid. It only becomes invalid if it went to a lower place of kedusha, not to a higher place of kedusha. Allah ches zar she'achol kezayis b'sar kachi kachim, but azara achazik azdamim. So he ate it in the right place. He ate it at the right time, but he's the wrong guy. He's a zar. Zar means a non-male kohen. Loike shenemar va'achlu oisam hu asher kupar bahem. And then it says Vaiter v'zar in Parshas Tetzav. I know there it's about the Meluim, but that's the rule. The zar lo yoich kikoi d'shem lo yoich. In other words, hamakim shakoyin oichol ube'eish roy le'echol. That is where if the zar eats it, he's chayiv malchus. But what happens if a zar eats it, but there's other issues? Abol l'machal azar sar kachim kachim. But you know where he eats it? He eats it in a place where a kohen also may not eat it. He eats it in a place where the meat became invalid. Bachutz. He'll be loike mishum oichel machutz. Right, there's a rule called ein isur chalal isur. Once you take the meat bachutz, it's usher to be eaten. That's it. Why mishum zar shachal kodesh? Because it's not even roy to kahanim. Also, like not because he's a zar, only because he ate the meat before zrikas adam, and not because of zarus. Why not also ein isur chalal isur? Now, if you remember, we already learned a few times in Ilchas Isurei Bia that Rambam gives the three exceptions. There are times that Isur is Chal on Isur, and that's Isur Koilu, Isur Moisev, and when they both go into effect, Bebas Achas. Now we're going to learn about Bas Achas. It'll be Chayiv Malchus twice. Final halacha of this Perek halacha test. Zor she'achal kezayis from Chatas Ha'oif. Now, guys, Chatas Ha'oif is eaten by the Kohanim. This Zor ate it. So you're going to say, okay, so that's a mamish like we had in halacha ches, a zor that eats a kazayis of psar kachim in the azar la'achas edikas damam. He's chayiv, we said, because he's zor. That's the lab of the zor. Here, there's another issue. How do you shecht a bird? Not by shchita, by malika. It's amazing that doing that act of severing the animal from the opposite side, from the neck, and even by pressing it down, all of that, if you do it not by korbanos, renders the animal into an avela. Aha. So here we say, achas mishum zar shachal asa kodesh, achas mishum oichol nevela. Shkol malika nevela, unless it's for kachim. And even though the Torah actually demands dafka from malika to be done, but that was only for kehanim. And not lazarim. So since now, when you did that act rendered that meat kosher for kohanim, that act made the meat included in the lav of a zar should not eat it, and that moment was the moment that rendered this burden to an avela if you are a non-kohen. And whenever two yisurim come at the same time, then both lav and machal, and this person, if he ate a kazayis, is going to be chayiv 2 sets of malchus. And now we are learning today's 3rd chapter. Now, Chevra, thank God we have time. We're going from Masechta Zvachim to Masechta Menachos. And whoever did not learn it, this is such an opportunity. And those who learned it, to review it, it's not so pashut. People get confused. And the way that Rambam is mesaded it, you don't get this when you learn the Mishnais and the Gemara. The Rambam was extraordinary in his order. So first of all, a quick hagdama that when it says in Vayikra, in part of the Seder of Vayikra, the beginning of Vayikra, after we go through the animal korbanos, when the Torah introduces a mincha, the Torah writes "V'nefesh kisakret korban mincha." If you remember Chitas Chumash Rashi, Rashi points out why does the Torah say the word nefesh? It doesn't say nefesh that brings an animal; it says Adam that brings an animal. Adam chiyakriv mikem. So Rashi Taka writes that who brings a korban mincha? Normally, people that are poor. And for a poor person, giving away a little bit of bread is a much greater sacrifice than a wealthy person giving up a whole behemoth. In other words, ki'ilu hikriv nafshay. There's something special about a mincha. And by the way, that's why parenthetically, why do we call the davening the tfilas mincha mincha? Tfilas shachris means morning. Arvis erev means night. It fits. What's mincha? Why don't we call it tfilah shel bein ha'arbayim? That's one of the pasha to answer. I think Tosfos says it because Eliyahu Hanavi only got answered by mincha. Mincha is the hardest tefillah to make. You got to do it in the middle of the day, especially now we're going into winter. So it's like you have to give your nefesh. There's a much greater demand to daven mincha properly than shachris and maidiv. Anyway, so that's just that there's a special koyach when it comes to a mincha. Now, what we're going to learn over here is basically amazing. All the categories. There are 3 korbanos, minachos, tzibur. And there are 9 minachos to a yachid. And we're going to go through all of them. Now, we're just beginning the sugya of menachos, but this is such a foundational pedic. And B'chlal, the Rambam is going to speak about the difference between a mincha of a kohen versus a non-kohen, like we keep on mentioning. If anyone who's a male kohen brings a mincha, you take a kibitza. The kibitza is muktar ala mizbeach, and shirayim are equal l'zichri kahuna. If a kohen brings a mincha, all of it is burnt on the mizbeach. We're going to learn about the importance of making sure that none of them become chametz. B'chlal in the Beis Hamikdash, and when it comes to animals, okay, there's nothing to talk about. It's not shaykh. Other than the 2 exceptions, the care that everything was, so to say, kosher lePesach. And we're going to have other very general rules when it comes to menachos. That's Perek Yud Beis. Perek Yud Gimel will already begin to go into the details of the menachos. But now we're going to learn about the 3 and about the 9, kohanim, non-kohanim. Perek Yud Beis is today's longest chapter. That's 23 halachas, and when we have time, we'll go through it. Pavolia, Pashat, Chevra, we have to remember this. These are the Yesoidisdika foundations of menachos. Halacha Aleph. Ha-menachos, first of all, they are min hakorbanos. The nefesh ki sakriv. Don't think because it has much less financial value. It's not a behema. There's no dam. It's a mincha. The ha-menachos habois bifnei atzman. Einam ve'einam boim mishum nesachem. So we learned before oilos ushlamim. They come along with minchas nesachem. In other words, they're viewed as an accessory to the main korban, which is the animal. That's not what we're talking about here. Here we're speaking about menachos that are not nesachim. That is the korban. So how do you divide them? How do you categorize them? First of all, mehen minchas tzibur umehen minchas yachid. Halacha beis. All of the menachos have to be brought from fine, very fine sifted wheat flour. That's called soilas chitim, even though there's going to be many different options of how they will be prepared. But before we get to that, flour from wheat, all chutz, minchas soita, which is private, oimer atnufa, which is tzibur. Both of these 2 are the only 2 menachos that come from barley. Halacha gimel. Sholosh minachos latzibur. So minchas tzibur is 3. Number 1, the oimer hatnufa. That's a minchas tzibur. Number 2, and v'hu karev lamizbeach. By the way, karev lamizbeach means kamitz, not all of it. Not like a mincha of a kohen, as will be learned in the next segment, in Tmidim and Musaf. Number 2, what's called a mincha, guys, halkap, even though it's not brought on the altar, are the shtei halechem, the 2 loaves, and that's like a chametz stick of bread, that is brought together with the 2 lambs that are the only shlamim of a tzibur. They are brought on the day of Shavuos, b'yoyim atzeres. Now, they are called a mincha, even though ve'enam kerevim l'gabei hamizbeach at all. Another unique exception is ve'em chametz. They are mamish made into chametz. And b'aleim nemar korban Reishis takrivu oisam lashem. Why is it called Reishis? Because, like we mentioned, even though the Omer is matir chadash of all of the 5 grains everywhere, but even after the Omer is brought, lechatchila, we don't bring in the Beis Hamikdash a carbon mincha from flour of wheat prior to the Shtei Alechem. So there's also like a din of a Reishis. Now, the third mincha, shlishis, lechem hapanim. The lechem hapanim that is made every Shabbos. Really, guys, it was not made on Shabbos. We're going to see it was made on Friday. Made on Shabbos means it's put on the Mizbeach on Shabbos. The bozichin are offered on the Mizbeach on Shabbos. And therefore, the chalukah is done on Shabbos. And also here, ve'enoi karav legabe ha-Mizbeach. Kul nechal ha'kanim k'mashi yizbar. Bottom line is that, yeah, there's a minchas tzibur. The only minchas tzibur, the only one that has some of it, the kemitza offered on the mizbech, is only the omer once a year. Quite amazing. And now, halach dalid. Now let's get into the fun. The teisha minachos liyachid. There are nine types of private meal flour korbanos. And all of them are offered on the mizbeach. Ve'eluhein aleph minchas choitem. Does a choite bring a mincha? Not always, right? In Vayikra, if I violated something, but that there should be mezid kares, shoygek chatas, I bring a kizba seira. Yeah, but hold on. But at the end of Vayikra, we learned about there's many korbanos chatois. That's called oila v'yodet. Oila v'yodet. And if you can, and if you can afford, you bring the animal. If not, you bring a minchas choite. V'hi ha mincha shemakre for ani. In some cases that he was chayv achatos, if he would have been, if he could afford, he would bring an animal. But if he can't, he gets to bring a flower. Number 2, next category, the mincha v'soita, as we just learned, also exceptional that it's soitim. It's also known as the mincha connected to jealousy. Minchas hakinois shekfar nisparshu ma'isel. When we learned hilchos soita, the third type, hamincha shemakriv kol koyin. Tchila, Kishi Yakonis Lava, the first day that the coin does the Avoida, he brings a Minchas Chinuch. Shamakrev Oisa Biyadei, Vihane Kreis Minchas. And by the way, we also learned that the first time the Kohen Gadol serves as a Kohen Gadol, even if he already brought a Minchas Chinuch, he brings another Minchas Chinuch. That's a side of the Chavitim. Now, Dalid, there is another Mincha, Shamakrev Kohen Gadol, every single day, which is called Chavitim. 5th category. Minchas hasoilas. Now, everything begins as soilas. Yes, it does. But as we'll see today, how were they prepared? Whether they were mixed only with oil, whether they were scalded with water and then mixed with oil, whether they mixed with oil was oil poured on it later. Gavalt. We're going to learn about 3 different moments where oil might be mixed with the mincha. Some of them had all the 3. Heads up, sometimes they would put the oil in the klei first, and only then would they put the flour. And then they would pour oil and mix it. So we're going to learn about Nesina Shemen Bekeli. We're going to learn about Belila, Yatzak, Yitzika. Yitzika means to pour. So we're going to see one mincha is called mincha soilis. It can come as an eder or an adam. 6th category, another type of mincha. It was prepared differently. It's called minchas machavas. I remember young, I was taught machavas. Everything is a patach. That's just a remembrance of a flat pan. It's a mincha that will be prepared on a flat pan versus mar cheshes. The seg oil goes down, right? That's just a simon for me. So either you put it in a deep frying pan, so it's going to be a thicker, softer, or it's going to be flatter, harder. Machbas is the flat, the one that's prepared in a flat pan. It can also come as an eder or an adam. 7th is the minchas mar cheshes. It's made in a deep pot or in a deep pan. Pan that has shulayim, has walls. It can also come as an eder or an adam. The 8th category is called minchas ma'afei tanur. Now, minchas ma'afei tanur itself has 2 types. Sometimes you call it chalois, neder or nadav. And the final is a ma'afei tanur that's made as pancakes. And we'll see in a moment how each one was prepared. V'hibah neder or nadav. Now, halachei kol hamenachos. Hakrei v'is legabe hamizbeach. In other words, what are we excluding? We just said before that by the tzibur you can have a mincha shtei, you have a shtei lechem, you have a lechem upon it. We're speaking about in the 9 that we mentioned. Ein kol achas mehem. You'll never find a mincha that's made with less than at least 1 isarin of flour. We already spoke about the shir of an isarin, which is the same shir for you to be chayiv, to be mafresh challah, the 43 point some eggs, 2.5 pounds, 5 pounds. If you have even a drop less than the isarin, garnished, it's essential. Now, chamesh menachos habois beneder unedava, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Right, just chazar the words. In other words, minchas soilas, minchas machvas, minchas marcheshes, minchas mafetanur chalas, and the minchas mafetanur rekikin. Yesh at least not the linder mehem kol sheir. So you're not bound by only 1 isarin. You can say I'm making a neder to bring 1,000 isarins or isroinims. Avo minchas oimer uminchas choite uminchas kenois uminchas chinuch and the chavitim. There, the isarin is both the minimum and the maximum. It's always the minimum. But in the 5 neder and the davos, you can add halacha vav. Kol hamenochos hakrevis l'gabi hamizbeach. They have to go through the step that's called hagasha. Hagasha means that the keli that has in it the mincha is going to be taken to the southern western corner by the kohen and touched on the mizbeach. Tunas hagasha b'mayit keneged chodesh ol keren d'remes maravos. And even though these menachos that are brought on the mizbech don't need tenufa, hagasha without tenufa, chutz u'minchas soita, v'oimenat tenufa, that these 2 also they need tenufa. And I know, guys, we already learned to klal. Whenever you need both, the waving is done before the hagasha, but you don't always need both. You have to remember which one needs what. Halacha zayin. All of them that are going to be going on the mizbeach to unois both shemen and levina. Guys, remember these are big rules. How much oil like shemen l'chali sarain, which means if I make a neder, I'm going to bring a minchas soilis. I'm going to bring 10 chai sarains, chai loigen. Every sarain gets its like. The klimetz levina and 1 handful of levina for the entire mincha, not by the oil for every yisarin 1 like. The handful of levina, which none of it will be separated, all of it will be burnt on the mizbeach. If I'm going to bring, what's the biggest mincha that can be brought at one time? So the biggest keli that they had was a keli that can hold 60 esroi nois or esroi nim of flour. And that's because if you have a larger utensil, you won't be able to properly mix the oil in the flour. If you would have only 1 leg of oil for all of the flour, it's called kol haroi lebila ein bila ma'akeves, even if you didn't properly mix it. But it has to be roi lebila. We're going to learn about this later, don't worry. So, even if you bring 60 esroinim of flour, 1 kaimetz of levina, ben shoyse isaron echad, ben shoyse shishim esronim.
An isaron we said was 5 pounds. That's a 5-pound bag.
Let's go. Let's say if that, it might be less, Rabbi Chaim. But let's say
that's an isaron.
That's an
and
isaron.
A leg is approximately what?
A leg is 4 revius, and a revius that's a machzadik. We're we have smaller shiurim. A leg by a revius is let's say 3 ounces. 12. A leg is around 12 ounces. Now, if I want, I can make a pledge to bring 1,000 isarins, but I'm not going to bring them all at one time. It's going to be 60 at a time, as we'll learn because of this din of royal labila. We'll get there. Now, what's the exception? They no shemen and no levina. We're learning mamash the foundations. Allah 8. Nasan vihikrit. If a person offered, if a person put oil on the mincha carbon, and he brought them up. We're speaking here about the minchas chayta, right? that these are the minchas kenois that cannot have shemen and levaina. If someone put on it shemen and levaina, 2 lavin. Like al shemen fnei yatzmai, v'levain fnei yatzmai. Another thing, when you put, now we'll see what happens if the oil was not placed on the flour. The oil was in a keli, and you place the keli on the keli of the flour. Nosan keli sheyesh by shemen, or a keli that has in it levaina on the minchas chayta. That's not called putting it on top. It's not mixed together. It's not touching. Another thing, minchas chinuch v'achavitin. Even though we learned that the oil can only be, the flour can only be 1 isaring. Nevertheless, moisav l'chalachas mem shemen k'moi sheyizba. No, normally the rule is for 1 isaring, 1 loik. We said that the minchas chinuch, for example, only 1 isaring. You could add more than the 1 loik of oil. Oil could be added, as we'll see details later. Allah hanai. The steps are kimitza. Kimitza means that Rambam will describe it soon, right? Or maybe it's going to be in next chapter. In Pedikut Gimel, we're going to have the Seder, and that will be the kimitza. So we'll leave that till later. Umaktir only the kaimets, but all of it on the mizbeach, and all of the rest. If a male kohen is bringing the mincha, he's the donor. She'enik metzes. No kimitza is taken. Elamaktirin oisa kulam. Shnema b'chol minchas koyin. We just had this pasuk in the previous chapter. Kolol tia loise yachal. 2 chapters ago. Halamadato sheminchas chinuch and the chavitim, which is the kohen gadol, and the kohen shehevi minchas choyto minchas nadava. Since he's the donor, in other words, it doesn't only have to be a kohen that came as an nadava. If the kohen is the owner, kulam nesraf l'zagav mizbeach, and none of them undergo kimitz. Now, kohen means dafke male. Says the Rambam, Malachiyud, ha-kohenes, minchasa, nikmetzes, keminchas Yisrael, ushirel nechalim. Oh, now, let's go what happens. We had this before. You have 2 babies. They were born in a cave. One mother was, one is coming from a family of Kohanim, and one is coming from a family of Yisraelim, and we don't know we don't know who is who. Everyone might be kohen or not. Now you have them bringing a mincha. What do you do? If he's the kohen, kolol tia. If he's a Yisrael, dafka kimitz. So what do you do? Minchasam nikmetzes keminchas Yisrael. But umitzat sheni ve'eno nechelas keminchas kohen. So keitzad oisib hakoymetz karav b'fnei yatzmai, and the shirayim have to be mispasin al beis hadeshen. Obviously, the Beis Hadeshen that's in the Azara, because this is a problem that happens in the Azara proper. Now,
Rabbi Zion, just to clarify, if someone brings 1,000 isarin, except for minchas chinuch, chavitin, and a kohen, only 1 kimitza is going on the mizbeach. The rest is for the kahanim.
1 kimitza from the 60, because you can never bring 1,000 together. You will see, you can only bring 60.
Every 60, 1 kimitza goes up. That's it.
And if you bring 1 isarin, also 1 kimitza.
So when you give a big donation, it's really just to the kahana.
You can argue by Hakorbanos, it's also the same way to a certain degree. Yeah. Yes. All right.
But by a carbon, a bigger, more chalev goes more onto the mizbeach, whatever it is.
Or more meat. You're right. Okay. Correct. Correct. Good point. Halacha yud beis. Kol hanusuis l'kohanim. Let's go by it. A woman who's married to a kohen, whether she herself was a kohenes, which makes absolutely no difference, because even as a kohenes, her mincha gets a kimitza. Her mincha, gets a kimitza to from it. Then Yisrael is ein shiyare mincha se'em nechalam. Here you also have a problem. Why? Because who owns the carbon? Interesting. Mipnei chelek habal. Ve'eino kulam le'ishim. Mipnei chelek ha'ishim. So not about the velados that got mixed up, which you can argue is such a rarity. Here it's a common thing. Elamai hakorev korev la'atzmai. And here also the shirayim are responsible al beis hadeshen. Another din, hakemitza, the act of the kemitza could be done anywhere in the Azara. Who knows what the chiddush? It's a big chiddush. Why is it a big chiddush? Because a mincha is what? Mincha is kachi kachi. We began Perikut Beis by saying that a mincha is a korban. What's the din by a korban? That the avoida, right? The shchita has to be done where? B'tzvayin hamizbeach. Not by the mincha, the kamitza can be done anywhere. And anywhere means even if you did the kamitza in the heichel, it's ksheida. Halacha Yud Gimel. Oh, now let me say like this. These are the words that we use when we learn the Gemara. Really, there's going to be two klei shadases involved in the mincha. First of all, when you designate flour for a korban mincha, it doesn't have kedushas haguf. That's a good klal. It only has kedushas damen, even though you verbally says this is harezu my mincha. Yeah, you can only begin doing the avoid of the mincha if you imbue it with kedushas mizbeach. That only happens when you put it in a klei shadis. So you're going to be putting all of the flour in a klei shadis. That's going to be in the sina of the klei shadis, number one. And later, when you're ready to do the kamitza, and there's many details until you get there, then when you do the kamitza, where do you put the kamitza? The kohen doesn't hold it in his hand. You do the kamitza in your hand. Then the kamitza will be almost like the shchita. Then the Kabbalah Saddam in the mincha will be placing the kamitza in a klei shadis. I'm going to call that the second klei shadis. Then you walk it to the mizbeach, and then the burning of the kamitza on the mizbeach is equivalent to the zrika Saddam. So when we speak about in Zvachim, the four avoida, right, shchita, Kabbalah, hilacha, and zrika, by a mincha, it's going to be nesina be klei shadis, but that's klei shadis number 2. That's what I want to make clear. And then the hilacha, right, the kamitza, shchita, that's the whole chiddush. Kamitza can be done b'chol makim ba'azara, even though it's kachi. Don't need soften. The putting it in the second klei shadis is not what the halacha Yud Gimel is speaking about. Halacha Yud Gimel is speaking about the first consecration of all of the flour. That's what we're talking. Mekachin mincha, even if the keli is on the ground. When the kamitza is put into the klei shadis later, that's like Kabbalah Saddam. That's an avoida. There, the kohen has to be holding the klei shadis, not over here. Here, this is like the hachana. You're being magdish the kedushas haguf or kedushas mizbeach, which is even more. So even the act of the kamitza could be done even if the keli is still on the kark. However, now that you have the kamitza in your hand, now that you're putting the kamitza in the klei shadis for another klei shadis, that cannot be put because this is like we mentioned. It's like Kabbalah Saddam. Kabbalah Saddam has to be done by a kohen holding the mizrak and b'yad yamin with no chatzitza with Allah halachas. Another rule: me'emasai yutru ashirayim b'achila misheyatzitz ha'oir b'roiv hakoyim. It's only after the majority of the kamitza was consumed by the fire, and I know it can take a couple of seconds, but you have to wait for that to happen. For now, it's just like after the chilavim and the ivarim were put on the mizbeach, then you have a heter to eat it. Halacha Yudal for the kahana, zichrei kahuna, kachi. Kol hamenochos hakrevis lagabe mizbeach have to be matzah, means non-chametz. Chein sheyarei hamenochos shoich l'makoyanim af al pi shehem utarim la'echol loisem b'chol machol. B'chol machol means prepared any way they want, and they are even allowed to add devash. Wow, guys, remember that menochos. That lo yosra hatoyda devash ela b'haktara. Chol se'or v'chol devash lo yisaktiru. Here the haktara was done with the kamitz. Now they're eating. They can add sweeteners. They can add sugar on top of maple syrup on top of their mincha. But ein oich meleisim chametz nish. Shenema lo yisayaf chametz even chelkan. I want you to understand that if you read the pasuk over there in Parshas Tzav, lo yisayaf chametz chelkan nosati. People criticize Hasidic Torahs, Chazal. This is a Hasidic Torah. In other words, you take away the kamon, you read the words in a different way. Chametz chelkam teaches you afilu chelkam lo yachmitzu. Now look at the details of this malchus. Hamachametz acher machametz. I want to tell you what that means. It became chametz when you needed it. Now, if someone is going to bake the chametz dikado, they're both going to be chayiv malchus. Chayiv v'loikin al kol asiya v'asiya shaba. And he goes into all of the different steps that if it's chametz dik, you have to stop, and continuing it is another lav. Ketzad Losha chametz. What comes after the kneading? Aracha chametz. You shake the loaves. Oikitva chametz. And then you put it into the oven chametz. For every single step, you're chayiv loiseyasa chametz, loiseyafa chametz. Why does the Torah write it twice? To tell you, if someone himself did everything chametz dik, that means he needed it and he allowed it to become chametz. Then he shaped it, then he smeared it, then he baked it. For everyone, he's chayiv malchus. Also chametz with chilavat soiflik, I'll call meiser shemahem. Halacha tezayin. What happens if you put a leavening agent or yeast on top of the dough, and you just let it sit there in a scham? Don't tell me you're not going to be chayiv malchus. It's a lav she'ein by Maaseh. Yes, Maaseh. Your Maaseh was putting the sa'od. Even though when you did your sa'od, at that second it didn't become chametz yet. But you did an action that caused it to become chametz. Halacha Yud Zayin. Tibel hashirayim beketzach by b'shumshumin. So now that you added, guys, you cannot add any of this to the kemitza, but you are allowed to add spices to the shirayim, very much like we learned today in Perek Yud. You can add tavlin into the meat. No problem. Matzah, it doesn't change its status of a matzah. And what's called matzah mitubelos. And the chiddush here is that the kemitza may not be spiced at all. Halacha Yudches. Hamachametz mincha psula. If the mincha was already invalidated and now you allow it to become chametz, you're parted. Shenever asher takrivu l'Hashem le'seyasa chametz. Haksher l'Hashem le'apsula. Chimtza when it was still kosher, and now someone brought it outside. Psul yoitza, right? And now, even though you brought it back inside, it cannot be eaten. And now, baited, you did another action. The chimtza achashem so yitziyasa ain't no like it. Another thing, if chimtza only when it was already on the top of the mizbeach ain't no like it. Shenamar asher takrivu ukvar karva zu vihi ksheira. Now, this is a big thing. The word Roish HaMizbeach means you did not put it on the fire. Don't confuse Haktara with Asher Takrivu, which is an amazing. So there's getting close. When is the Kemitza close? When the Kohen is already standing with it on the Mizbeach. So even though it wasn't Mukrav, there was no Haktara yet. It wasn't Muktar. Nevertheless, the lav of Chametz is not something you'll be punished for. Halacha Yutes. Maybe it's even allowed to happen, or at least you won't get punished. Halacha Yutes. Hamachametz lechem apanim. The lechem apanim is from the three menachos tzibur that don't even go on the mizbeach. Also like it. Shenemer kol hamincha. However, minchas nisachim, the ones that come as a accompaniment to an animal carbon deer, you're not allowed to make it chametz, but you're not going to be chayv malchus. Ein ba malchus. She'im gibla b'mayim, and explains why. Because how can any flour become chametz? Only if there's water. Only if there's water added to it. All of the menachos that are nisachim are only needed with oil. Oil, like any other made paytas, cannot be mechametz nekuda. If you put water, it's already possible. We just learned before halacha yudches that if you're a mechametz mincha psula, then you're potter. So the only way you can make minchas nesachim chametz, if you put water, it's already invalid. Then gibel maybe you needed it with oil. So what? Oil cannot be mechametz. Then gibel b'sham nesachim. Then we say made paytas same ve'ein machmitzim. Halacha chav hachitim shal menachos. Now, my friends, even though the word soilus means fine flour means you removed all of the klippa. One of the techniques that people would use that would make the flour even finer would be first to soak the kernels in water, and only then would you separate the klippa. That made it a better separation. But now that we said we don't want to have chametz, even a grain in water can become chametz dik. So achitam shel menachos ein loises in oisam. We don't have them soaked in water to remove the bran. Shama yachmitzu. Now, I want you to know that if people are very diligent, they can check and make sure the kernels are not cracked. And if there was a cracked kernel, they can right away work with it. There are ways to prevent it from becoming chametzik, but it demands a high level of zrizus. And since these preparatory steps did not need to happen by Kohanim in the Makom Kodesh, so it's done by non-Kohanim. Okay. And by the way, that means that if Kohanim are the ones that are doing it, we taka allow Kohanim to do the step. Who prepares it at Tzibur? Not even Kohanim. But since it's at Tzibur, the only one that goes on the Mizbeach of Tzibur is Omer. Yes, they would soak the barleys. Shadei at Tzibur Zerizanim u'Mishamrim Ois. So Gavaldik expression. So you have Kohanim Zerizim and you have Tzibur Ar Zerizim. Halacha Chafal. Kol HaMenachos HaNe'efois. All menachos that are going to be baked, all of them, are going to be mixed with lukewarm water. Now we learn when it comes to chametz, lukewarm water is worse than cold water. It's mechametz even quicker. Doesn't matter. But umeshamram shalayachmitzu hoyel v'lishisasam aviyasam ifnim ba'azara. And anshe pnim are zirizin, so we're not concerned with the fact that you warm it, that there is a moment in which it's mixed, not with cold water, with worse with the warm water. Allah chav beis. Another rule. That is where they would bake the menachas. So if you remember, we had different lishkois in Ezras Noshim designated for that. As it says, and over there, final halach in this peidik, halach of Gimel, kol hamenachos, it's grinding and it's sifting could be done by chutz. Exactly why we learned in halacha chaf that ain't loisasin, because it's done by chutz. However, but they're making it into dough, and then the shaping of the breads, we're going to learn that, God willing, tomorrow, a lot of details, and the baking has to be done bifnim. Now, bifnim doesn't mean kohanim. That's why the Rambam in Halacha Chaf Aleph didn't say kohanim zrizim. He wrote, whatever is done bifnim, anshe penim zrizim. It can even be done by Yisraelim. V'chol ma'aseim kshedim bezor, ad she'yavoy lebeis ha'kmitza. Like we said, the kmitza is like the shchita. Even though shchita kshedim bezor, kmitza won't be kshedim bezor. Certainly not the nesina of the kmitza and the keli, etc. Now, umachbas umar cheshes, we're going to learn all these details soon. Hoyu ba'azoron, these different types of pans, right? We're not speaking about the afia. We're speaking now about they were fried on fire. Another din, tanur shel migdash shel mateches hoya, and I know that when we spoke about the minchas nesachim, sometimes the shchita is magdish the flour, but for example, shtei halechem, the lechem apanim, they did not come with meat. What was mekadosh them? The making of it. So you needed to make them in a tanur. The tanur has a din of a kli. Whatever is mekadosh, it has a din of a kli. There is a klal. We don't have a single kli made out of cheres. So that's why the ovens, even though sometimes the baking was not mekadosh the bread, but since some of the menachas became mugdash through its baking, the tanur has a din of a kli, and therefore they had to all be made out of metal. Gewaldig. We'll stop over here, and we're really exciting. Mamish, the whole sugi of menachas al haseder. So we spoke about like the 5 from the 9. The menchasoilas, machvas, marcheshes, mafi tanur chalois, mafi tanur kikin. We're going to learn exactly how each one was made in the beginning tomorrow's chapter. Now, just stop recording over here just for the. I'm going to learn the next 3 chapters sometime tonight, because tomorrow morning I'm on a plane, and then we're going to get it to be played tomorrow morning at 5:30. I'll tell you how long it took. Guys, menachas is special. It's good stuff. L'chaim.
It's special.
Special.
Yeah.
It gets very detailed tomorrow. Like, wow.
Rabbi, the lechem apanim was matzah, halachically matzah, right?
Yeah, but even though it was a tefach thick, but it was not chametz.
So that, I guess that's the thing that's hard for us to like think about when we think of matzah. We think of our matzah.
Yeah.
Clearly, all these menachos that were not chametz were not our type of matzah. They were like they were bread.
Oh yeah, they were bread. Oh yeah. Yes.
And did you just say at the end here that the ovens that they baked them in were metal ovens?
Yes.
Aha. Interesting. Okay. And which lishka were they baked in?
So if you remember, if I remember correctly, I know like this, that the Chavitim, when you went into Shar Mizrach, so you had, I think, on the Mizrach side there was a lishka of the Chavitim. They were baked over there.
So that was like a bakery.
But I don't think that was the only place. I'm sure that one of the chambers in the Ezras Nashim from the four corners, they had a lot of where they used to bake what was called the lishka of they used to cook the shlamim of the nazir. They didn't only cook the meat there they cooked it. I'm right. They prepared a lot of food there.
And Rabbi, the Hagasha where they touched the corner of the Mizbeach, what did you say that's comparable? That's comparable to the Zrika?
No. The Hagasha, no. The Tnuf and the Hagasha is comparable to the Tnuf and the Hagasha of animals. The four main avodas, which is Shchita, Kabbalah, Eiloch, and Zrika, by Menachas, it's Kemitza, Nesina Bekeli. But when we learned the Sugya, we kept on calling it Klei Sheni. That's what we learned today again, because you needed to be Magdash everything first, all of it in a Klei Shabbos. It can be on the ground. Anyway, so the Kemitza, putting the Kemitza in a Klei Shabbos, Hailacha, and Haktara. The burning of the Kemitza is equivalent to Zrikas Adam. And there's no imurim. So it's like a bird, like the Chata Soif. There's no imurim. After the dam, by the Chata Soif, you get to eat it. After it's burnt, then the Kahanim get to eat the Shirayim.
Okay, but we don't do something like a Hagasha with an animal, do we?
So the Bikurim had a Hagasha that I remember. Trying to think. No, I don't think so. I don't think Hagasha is by
something.
Yeah.
All right, Rabbi. Shkoyach.
Shkoyach.
Safe trip.